Hello, my friends, and welcome. It's What's Up? John Petersen here from the Arlington Institute, and Gregg, Braden, and I get together every 2 weeks for a half an hour or so to just chat about whatever's on our minds, and we're happy to have you with us. Gregg, what's up? What you been thinking about?
John, it's good to see you. And, there's so many things we could talk about. You and I had a conversation recently that the events unfolding in the world are apparently not random. I think it's very clear that they're not random events, that we're driving towards some kind of an outcome. I'm looking at another facet of that non-randomness. And the question that I asked is, are we living out a script? Is the timeline, or are the events of the timeline that we are living, is it mapped out as a script? And if it is mapped out, do we succumb to that script, or do we, by virtue of consciousness and our free will, is it part of our destiny to transcend, not necessarily even fight, but to become more than where that script apparently leads? One of the ways that I've gone about looking at this is looking at biblical history. Back in the 1990s, I became a member of an organization that's called BAR, Biblical Archaeology Review. And it was fascinating, John, because it was moving away from the religiosity of the Bible, rather looking at the Bible as a historical document of events that actually occurred. Now, when I was a kid, a lot of the things in the Bible, I was growing up in the 50s, 60s, a lot of people thought, those were make-believe things. And what Biblical Archaeology Review and some other organizations did is they began to take the Bible as a literal document of history, regardless of the religion. And so they'd say, well, according to the Bible, these things happen here. What if we dig here? And we had sites like Ashkelon, just north of Gaza. And I've had the opportunity to be there personally, to visit the archaeological sites in Ashkelon and Jericho, and the tunnels under Solomon's temple, and things like that. So what the Bible has shown historically is that it is based on information that is factual. When we think about a scripted timeline, the question is, how deep do those facts run? And where this gets really interesting is because the events that we're seeing in the Middle East right now are playing out eerily similar to actually two timelines that we see in parts of the Old Testament. So I'll be specific, and this is all in the Old Testament. There's one big war between good and evil that is the theme throughout the biblical text, but there are many battles. And there are two big battles that are identified. One of them is a mysterious battle, Psalms 83. And another one is the big one that people hear about in Ezekiel. Ezekiel was at 38 and 39. At the end of time in the valley of Armageddon near Megiddo. And I've been to those places as well. So the reason I'm thinking about this now is because the Psalm 83 battle identifies nations in biblical times that will converge, that will turn and converge upon Israel. And when we look at the modern names of those nations, it's exactly what's playing out right now, with a couple of exceptions that have to change. And if we see those exceptions change, we're following this map that was laid out over 3,000 years ago. One of those exceptions is right now, Israel is on reasonably good terms. It's called a cold treaty with Jordan and with Egypt. 1979, the Camp David Accords with Egypt. Egypt now, for the first time since 1979, is threatening to walk away from those accords if Israel proceeds militarily in certain options. And if that happens, it is actually fulfilling what some people call the prophecy of Psalm 83, leading to the next great war. There are inner nations and outer nations. Psalm 83 is about the inner nations of Lebanon and Syria and Jordan and Egypt and what we now call Gaza. The Ezekiel is about the outer nations, where they say the great nations from the north, Iran and Russia, converge with other nations. Turkey is part of that. They call it Persia, which is now Iran, Tyre, which is now Lebanon. So the question, as I'm looking at this, first, it's eerie how similar the events are that are playing out now that are described in those texts. So number one, how did that happen? Is it a case of ancient remote viewers? Is that what we call those prophets? And number two, are we bound to those timelines, or through the free will of our consciousness that's also described, can we transcend those timelines? And I'm just wondering if you thought much about that, John. This is like a bigger picture.
Well, what I think about when you say that is that we're back in simulation world again.
Yeah.
That this is some kind of a deterministic environment, that certainly you have latitude within the game space, if you will, within the design of the rules of the operating space, but you can't get outside, outside of your lane. But you can run across and try any number of other kind of things. Now, it's a kind of a simplistic, it's clearly more complex and sophisticated than that.
Yeah.
But there is something, I mean, this goes back to kind of the cyclical nature of reality. This goes almost directly to the underlying principles and the concepts underneath Martin Armstrong's computer, Socrates, and which says that everything in this reality is based upon some kind of a cyclical, oscillatory kind of process. And so no matter whether you take the weather or politics or education or family relationships or, anything around, Armstrong's got 75 of them that he's isolated and got figured out. He says, it just keeps coming together and they keep doing it. And sometimes they're additive, sometimes they're subtractive, and so on. But that's, again, like saying it's a big machine that you're inside of, and that and it is therefore predictable, which of course is what Marty Armstrong uses the whole thing for. And so you've just raised it to another kind of level. Well, let's just end this, and thank you for this. But one of the interesting almost certainties associated with kind of considering these kinds of questions is that this stuff might be too complicated for us to even understand. And what we're limited is by the kind of the models and the patterns and the kind of the ideas that we kind of brought into the room with us. I've had people, as a matter of fact, with somebody this last weekend, our speaker, and talking about whether it was a simulation that we live in, and she went out to her channeled source, and the source said, well, in terms that you can understand, it's you could call it a simulation. And the kind of the clear implication is that it's above our pay grade, and there are things going on here that we're not yet able to fully integrate and make sense out of. And somehow you've just got to kind of work your way through this thing, and be very sensitive to the little indicators that
John, I agree with that 100%. But here's the thing: we humans are so unique in that we do not know what the top end of our processing capabilities are. And the reason is because when we have these conversations and we're pushing against those preconceived boundaries, what we're doing is we're building neural networks that open the door to deeper understandings. We are capable of it. We probably are not there now, but I think we are capable of it. And that's why I appreciate you, and I appreciate the opportunity to have these conversations.
Yeah, me too.
Yep.
Well, thank
All
you
right.
very much. And for those of you in the audience, thank you for being with us today. We really appreciate it. And it's always fun for Gregg and me to get together and, and have these unscripted, unplanned conversations. And we'll come back and do it all again in another couple of weeks. In the meantime, you can find out all kinds of things about the Arlington Institute, where this all comes from, at arlingtoninstitute.org. And we hope that you'll go there and rummage around and look at the many kind of things that we have. And I hope that you'll share this with in your networks, and that you'll tell your friends about this, and that you'll join and become a member of this. So thank you so much. Thank you, Gregg.
Thank you so much, John. Thanks everyone for sharing a little bit of your day with us today. Look forward to our next.
Take care.